Hi, it's Molly and welcome back to my channel. Welcome here if it's your first time. Today's video is all about brows. I wanted to share the different tips and tricks that have worked for me as a person with more sparse brows. I'm calling this a polished feather brow. Basically, we are going to create hair strokes and brows where there are none. We'll start with the tips and then we'll move into the tutorial in real time. Figuring out brow proportions was a game changer for me. Your brows should line up with the side of your nostril, not your nose, but your nostril. So on this side, they line up really well, but when I go over to the other side, you're gonna see in a second, they start a little bit farther over. So I'm gonna have to add more hairs on one side to really get my brows looking even. The arch should line up with your nostril and your pupil, and the brows should end right at the outer edge of your eye. So once you figure those out, it's gonna make it so much easier for you to figure out where to put your product. My next tip comes from working as a makeup artist. Whenever I was working with a new client or a new model, I would always request their photos the day before so that I could look through and see what was working for them and what didn't work for them. And this really will help you to find the most flattering techniques and the most flattering shapes, colors, and all of that for your own face. And if you're really struggling with a certain area or a certain technique, take a video, watch it back, and you can see where things have gone wrong. Are your brows too full, too thin, too sparse, too filled in? And this is a photo of me at 21 years old with those skinny mini Pamela Anderson eyebrows, which is why 18 years later, my brows are still growing back in. And here are my brows today. So you can see how having all of these photos side by side can really help you figure out what is working for you. Dig through your photos and definitely use them to your advantage. My next tip is to go in and groom your brows maybe once a week or every other week. This is a Japanese peach fuzz razor. These razors buzz all of the little fuzzies off your face without being super sharp. You hold them horizontal to your skin and it just gently cleans up all of the hairs around your brows. And this really surprisingly makes a very big difference because once this area is cleaned up, I feel like you need to do a little bit less work and use a little bit less product to get a crisp, clean looking brow. I also like to brush my brows up with a spoolie, and if there's any long hairs, you can trim those so that when you put your brows back in place, you get, again, really clean looking brows. The next thing that has really helped me keep my eyebrows in place is to use my eyeshadow primer all the way over my lid and bring it up into my brows. I use a lot of moisturizing and hydrating products, and that can make the pomades slip around a little bit. So I have found that when I do this and brush a little powder over it, it really helps my brow products have extra longevity. My next tip is to use a brow gel with glycerin instead of soap for soap brows. I loved how full soap brows made my eyebrows look, but I did feel like I noticed my brows were falling out a little bit more frequently and it was a little bit messy. So this gel is so nice, it just brushes on. This is the Laura Mercier one and I absolutely love this product. I feel like the brush pulls up just the most perfect light amount of gel and I can push the brows up and get that volume without any mess. My next tip is to use a very thin brow brush because this will make each pomade stroke look like an actual brow hair. I also like brushes with spoolies so that I can continue to brush the brows up and look for bald patches. These are my beloved ABH Brow Wiz pencils and I want to show you how this thin brush makes such more of a realistic looking hair even than the very thin Brow Wiz pencils. It really amazes me. The next tip is to match your brow product to your natural brow shade. Whatever shade you choose should be the same undertone as your brow hair. So if you have cooler brows, you're going to want to use a cooler brow product. And the pomade should really disappear into your brows. When I'm using this Caramel Strawberry Blonde brow pen, and I love the ABH Caramel shade, but when I try to use that to recreate the brow strokes, it really comes off as too warm and you can see each stroke. I like to put a lot of pomade on the top of the container and then just wipe my brush off until I have the perfect amount on the brush. And this gets me anywhere from 4 to 10 little brow strokes before I have to go dip back in. The most realistic looking brow strokes are under 1/4 of an inch. So I wanted to show you here on my hand so you can see how tiny they really are. I do like to fill in those sparse areas first. I find that I use less product when I fill in those bald patches first, and then I will go underneath the brow and do a very thin line. It's such light pressure, and this really helps pull the brow together and give me a more polished look. And then I will brush my hairs down, and if I need to, I will add a few strokes down and towards my ear, going in that same direction how my brow hairs grow at the top. And now I will fill in the front a little bit so that I can line up the start of my brow with the side of my nostril. So I actually am using too much pressure here, and the brow strokes are coming up too high, which is making the brow look a little bit boxy. And I wanted to leave this in, and I wanted to show it to you because it's a really easy fix. So we'll come back to this in just a minute. So you can see why it was important to fill in the sparse areas with a brow pomade that matched my brow hairs. And now I'm going to go back in with a warmer strawberry blonde brow gel that matches my hair. And you only need to do this step if your hair is warmer or cooler than your brows. And I'm just very lightly on the top of my brows, adding that warmth back in. The next tip is to clean up the edges with a lighter shade, either a brow highlighter pencil or a concealer in a flat brush. The flat brush is really, really important. And the great thing is these flat brushes are so affordable. This is a synthetic brush, and I'm using the side of it, not the top of it, but the thinner side to clean up under my brow, over my brow, and just really get a nice crisp edge without having to use any more of the darker pomade. So this keeps the overall look of the brow lighter. And here I can tell that front of the brow is really bothering me, so I'm going in with extra highlighter to try to make this look a little bit smaller. And you will see in just a moment when I realize what needs to be done. And yeah, you'll see. I also like to go over the top outer arch of my brows and just really soften that so that I don't get a super pointy arch. Let's go over the other side in real time now so that you can get a better idea of how long this will take you. So again, I'm starting with that glycerin brow gel just to pump up the volume of my brows and also to give my brows some texture so that I can manipulate them, brush them up, brush them around, and just keep them in place. And next I'm going in with my cool toned pomade. And the pomade is the best product I've found for really recreating thin hairs on these balding areas. As you can see, and I know that the camera shifted a little bit here, it will come back in focus in just a second. You can barely see the product as I'm putting it on because this shade is such a good match and because this brow brush is so thin. Every stroke I place, I try to do it with purpose to fill in a balding area. So I do like to fill in those outer arches. Okay, I'm back to the other side, and this is the moment where I lose it and I cannot take it anymore. So what I'm doing is drawing the brows a little bit shorter, and I'm using less pressure. I'm holding the brush by the spoolie so there's not as much pressure going on to my skin. And as I mentioned, drawing them a little bit shorter so they look more natural. I am much happier. So back to the other side, I'm brushing up as I go to fill in those bald patches, but trying to not press too hard because I don't want to move the pomade around. And I do a few less brow strokes at the front on this side because that brow is already much more filled in and closer to the side of my nose. I am also making sure that this tail gets filled in so that I can have a really nice balanced looking eyebrow. And I'm going back over that bottom with a fine line. For me, this really polishes up the look of the brows. Like I mentioned, you might not need all of these tips. They might not all work for you. So really pick and choose, play around and see what works. I'm going to add in those warm tones. And as you can see, I'm pressing really lightly so that I don't disrupt any of that pomade. I'm going to clean up the edges now with that brow highlighter. My last tip for making your brows last is to use a setting spray. I also just try to not touch them a lot, but the setting spray really helps so that that pomade lasts all day. I love how fluffy and full these look. Thank you for watching. I really do appreciate it, and I hope this video was helpful. I'll see you in the next video. brow